Okay, gang, welcome aboard once again. It's time for the weekly Mac Forum video chat. This time, it's the Sunday, December 10th edition, 2017 edition of the show. Not much of a forum roundup this week. The last 3 or 4 days, we've been having some interesting forum issues where some of the databases that we rely on to track forum posts and everything are not updating correctly. Just to give you an example of something that has been happening. Now, if you look here in our community announcements thing, let me show you what I mean. And it may have fixed itself by now, but we'll take a look and see. Now, according to this, the last time this Mac Forum Sunday chat thread was updated was December 3rd, which would be last Sunday. That's not true, as you'll be able to see in just a second here. I'll show you what I mean. I went in this morning and posted the link to today's show, and so there should be in the thread, as I scroll down here, we're close to the end here. And while I'm doing this, just a reminder that this is a good place to look. Now you see, remember in the previous page it said the most recent post was December 3rd. Well, as you can see, there's a post from this morning where I posted the link to today's show. So that database is not opening correctly, and as you'll be able to see when I show you here in just a second, what that means is that for example, this page, it has been the same for me for about 3 days, starting, I believe, on Friday evening. Is the first time I noticed it. This same set of pages and thread titles has been showing up for when I search for new posts. So if you're wondering why you're not getting the volume of announcements or answers that you think you should be getting or that you typically get in the forum, that's probably the reason. We're having some issues there, so be aware of that. The administration team is aware of it. We forwarded it on to our contacts, and hopefully they are working on the fix even as we speak. I'm not sure when that will be resolved, but as you know, we've had other database issues recently. One of the other things that you will see happening also, if you try to post, it may tell you that a database error has occurred, and then if you try to post again, it may tell you that a duplicate post has been entered. If you refresh the page, your post should show up. But that doesn't necessarily mean that one of your fellow members is going to be able to read it. So it may not show up for them as they aren't showing up for me. So bear with us as we get this resolved, and we'll see what we can do to fix the problem. Now, let's go ahead, since we can't do very much of a forum roundup without a working forum. Let's go ahead and dive into some other issues here. I'm going to turn once again to my buddy Kirk McLaren over at the Kirkville website, because he pointed out something. There's been a new update to iTunes. They're up to 12.7.2. It's another maintenance release. And once again, now I had not noticed this because I just got around to updating that yesterday. And I'll talk about that a little bit here in a minute. But one of the things that has changed in 12.7.2, and I'm going to show you what we mean here. Let me go ahead and pull it up, and I'll talk about it. I would probably not have noticed this because my iMac does not have a built-in DVD drive. But Kirk pointed this out, and so I decided to test this just to see if everything was correct. if you launch iTunes and you go to the general preferences, go to preferences, go to the general tab. As you can see right here, it has some options. It's asking me what I want to do when a CD is inserted. Ask to import the CD and import settings. This little block of info right here. That's what has happened in the past. Right now, I have my external CD drive attached. That is what has happened in the past. Okay, that's what most users expect to see because that's the way it's been in the past, whether you've had your CD drive attached or not. Now, remember what that dialog box looks like. I'm going to close it for a second. I'm going to click OK. And just for the heck of it, I'm going to get out of iTunes for a second. Now, I'm going to disconnect my external drive. So right now, as far as the computer is concerned, I have no DVD drive attached, no CD DVD drive attached. Now, let's go back and look at those same settings. Okay, I've gone to Preferences. I'm in the General tab, so I'm in the same area. All of those options for what to do when the CD is inserted are gone. So you will only see those other options if you have either a machine that still has an internal CD DVD drive, or if you have a drive attached. The minute that drive is not attached, those options go bye-bye, and the only thing that you see is this import settings option here, which allows you to have some control over the quality of the import when you import a CD. So just want you to be aware of that so you're not completely confused. It doesn't affect a huge number of people in day-to-day operation, but it is something you want to be aware of. All right, moving out of iTunes now into a couple of other issues. And let's see what I have next. Oh, iPhone tip here, wallpaper tip. I want to show you, okay, those of you that have, I'm going to have a link to this in the website, in the show notes tonight, just as I usually do. Yesterday, I was working a basketball game, and one of the students that I know pretty well, who happens to be an iPhone user, came up and he had a new wallpaper that he had gotten. He wanted to know how to set the wallpaper, to change it, because he wasn't quite sure. He knew it was on his phone, but he couldn't get the phone to display the wallpaper. Okay, so it's real simple. Let me show you how it's done. Now, those of you who are regular users and have seen me take screenshots of my home screen before, you'll know that I've recently changed this screen. In fact, I did this today to make sure this worked. What you want to do is you're going to go, if you want to, you have a new wallpaper, you want to change the wallpaper on your phone, go into Settings, and then you want to look for the option that says Wallpaper. Tap there, okay? And you can pick a new wallpaper here. I'm going to choose one. We're going to choose New Wallpaper. And as you can see, I can choose something from my camera roll if I want to, live photos. I'm going to look at some of the live screens that they have provided with the phone, and then you just tap one, and it gives you an option here to either cancel, which means I want to change, I don't want to change, or set it. And you can choose whether it's still, perspective, or live photo. Let's say I want to set this. This is the one I want to use. I'm going to set it, and now it's going to ask me if I want to use it for both my lock screen and my home screen, or each one individually. Now, if I wanted to use it on both, which is what I normally do, I would choose set both. I'm going to have this set as my lock screen temporarily, just to show you. Okay, now it says it's saving the wallpaper. I'm going to go back. I'm going to get out of this. Now you can see I told it to use it as my lock screen. So my home screen stayed the same as it was. Now let's go back. Let's look. I'm bringing my phone back. Now there it is on the home screen. I'm going to bring up my lock screen. All right, now you can see my lock screen is different because I told it to use that as a lock screen. So that's a good tip for you if you like to experiment with wallpapers and the like. Okay. Now, another little tip that I want to be sure that I bring to your attention, and as I say, I have a link to all of these in the show notes. Another little tip, and I wish I had access to this. I wish this had existed a few years ago. The one I'm going to get to in just a second, I'll tell you about. But this bit of information, this site in particular, probably is going to be the most useful set of tips that I bring you today. It has to do with ways to reduce the amount of battery life that iOS 11 is using. Now, these tips apply to other versions of the iOS as well, but they've been updated to deal with specifically with iOS 11. And it comes to us from Connor Carey at iPhone Life, of course. Now, some of the tips we've talked about a little bit before, kind of piecemeal, but these are some that will be helpful. They work for both iPhone and iPad. All right, here are some suggestions that you can change. You can look at the battery life suggestions. Your iPhone will present you with some settings to change that might increase your battery life, okay? And you can look at each one of these. So let's see what they had. For me, now I'm going to bring up my iPhone again. We're going to go to settings. I'm going to back out, and this time I'm going to battery. Okay? And here are some suggestions. It shows me in the last 24 hours which apps have been using battery time and which ones I might want to change. That's a good thing to look at over the last 7 days. Here is something. All right, calendar for the most part, nothing taking up a huge amount of battery life here. So, but if I did have something, this would be one of the places that I would want to get a look at it and have some control over it. Okay? Another thing to do, and this is something I may turn off. I have a function called Raise to Wake turned on. And that is, I use my iPhone as an alarm clock at night, and it's the only clock on in the bedroom. So sometimes I will pick it up in the middle of the night to see what time it is. Don't feel like fumbling around for the home button. Or with the Raise to Wake function, when I pick it up, it wakes up the screen. But if you move your phone around a lot, say you carry it in your hand while walking or running, Raise to Wake will cause the screen to trigger and untrigger numerous times. That will burn some battery, so you might want to look at that. Also, if your phone is constantly looking, if you've got a bunch of apps waiting to update, but your phone is looking for a network to use, that can do it. All right, and a lot of times I'll let updates stack up for a day or two, but that can sometimes reduce your battery life as well. The number of widgets that you have on your lock screen can do it. And what those widgets are, I found over the years that the number of widgets is important sometimes, but what those things are can be. Some apps behave much, much better in the background than others do. So for example, when we first got our iPhone 3s, we were on iPhone 3GS. My wife discovered that her phone was running down significantly faster than mine. And we could not figure that out. I was using my phone a little more than she was, but yet her phone frequently was running down faster than mine. And it took quite a bit of experimentation for me to figure out that one of the culprits might have been we had a weather app open in her phone, and it was periodically searching for updated weather information. I didn't have that open and running on my phone. Once we shut that down, the problem went away. So you can see what you have has a lot to do with whether or not this works. This is a series of tips rather that I think you'll find useful, even if you're not having battery issues. If you can keep track of some of these tips and spread them to your iPhone using friends, you will appear to be a genius if one of these tips solves the problem for them. And that's what this is about, making you look like a Mac and iPhone genius, you know. All right. Now, another iPhone tip here. I'm going to bring my phone screen back up because I want to show you something. I wish that I had had this, access to this kind of information a few years ago. Before smartphones became as smart as they are now, there was a period of time where I was routinely flying back and forth between Iowa and Louisiana on a fairly regular basis. And one of the things that was somewhat annoying to me is that sometimes the flight time and everything would change, and I wasn't aware of it. I mean, just to give you an example, one year I flew to Iowa over Thanksgiving break. I was scheduled to fly back on the day that has affectionately become known as Black Friday. And I had booked the flight months and months and months before. And that morning we were a little bit late leaving the house. So I did not call ahead to check on the status of the flight. We drive all the way from Ames to Des Moines to the airport, go to the airport. We get there a little bit ahead of time, and I don't see anybody in line. We were close enough to the departure time that there should have been people in the line checking in, doing the usual routine checking baggage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So finally, about the time we get there, one of the gate agents comes up and asks why we're there. And we told them we were here for the 11:30 flight. And she said, there is no 11:30 flight today. And I said, you got to be kidding me. I booked this flight months ago. And she said, no, there's never an 11:30 flight the day after Thanksgiving. I don't. I said, well, I don't know. When I booked this flight months ago, I was not told that there wasn't an 11:30 flight. So here's one way that you can fix that issue, perhaps. Take your browser like Safari and open Safari on your phone. And let's just say that I want to check. I'm going to pick a number here. Not sure this one will work. Let's just say that you know that you're flying Delta, for example, and that your flight number was 1200. Okay, if I put that in just into the top end of the search area and hit search, the first thing that comes up is this little flight card. Now, as you can see from this flight card, it shows me the information for tomorrow, the flight, the departure time, arrival time. This particular flight is scheduled to leave at 11:27 a.m. Atlanta to Boston. This is a good way to track your flight and see if it's going to be on time. It'll have gate information. Now, I just found out about this recently, so I'm not sure how quickly it gets updated, but it's one more tool in the bag for the frequent flyers, so that you can keep yourself up to date. And if you're going to have friends or family meet you at the airport, it'll make it a little bit easier for them to know about things like gate changes, things like that. So that's an interesting little tidbit. I probably won't be using that option very much for the time being, since I'm not flying routinely now, but it's an interesting thing to have available to you. All right, and finally, the last one, I didn't get a chance to read through this extensively, so I didn't prepare a demo. But this, some of you who are regular listeners know that once or twice now, I have set a restriction passcode on my phone, only to subsequently forget that restriction code, and then have to go in and basically wipe my phone and reload things. So this little article, once again, this comes from iPhone Life website, and it's Jim Carpin, and it's early October, so relatively recent, and recent enough to be current. Has some tips on ways that you can work around having to completely reset your phone or iPad, and it has been updated for iOS 11. Take a look at that. I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. As usual, everything we talk about will be in the show notes. And a bonus tip for you guys. I'm just going to briefly mention this tonight. I had planned to go into this in a little more detail, and I forgot to pull up the relevant sites and article info. So I'll save the more detailed discussion for the next time. But this is one I want to be sure I mention to you. Yesterday, I spent some time yesterday afternoon, and in fact, it took several hours to do this, downgrading my hard drive from the APFS format that's used under High Sierra to back to HFS Plus. Now, here's why. I was still running one of the High Sierra betas, and my internal Fusion drive was set to APFS. And I like the APFS because, for me, that new file system has shown some speed increases. But the problem was, when Apple released the final releases of High Sierra, they do not support the combination of APFS and a Fusion drive yet. And I stuck around on the beta for a little while, hoping that they would, this would be a quick fix. In a couple of weeks, they'll have this worked out, and then I can move on and go with what I need to do. Well, they haven't fixed that yet, and it looks like it may be a while. I'm not privy to any inside information or anything, but it just looks like it may be a while. So I decided I wanted to revert my hard drive back to HFS Plus, and then install High Sierra on that, because High Sierra will run on a drive that's formatted HFS Plus. The problem is, to do that, you have to erase the hard drive. So I spent some time yesterday erasing the drive and then reloading everything. I'm going to give you a general rundown of the steps today. Next week, we'll talk about it in a good bit more detail, and I'll have some screenshots of some things that you need to see. But the first thing I did, as you can see here, one of the first things that I did, as you can see from this external drive, was to copy my High Sierra drive onto an external drive to have a good backup, and also to make sure that that drive is bootable. Now, what I did was to download the, I went ahead and I had a drive. I formatted the drive, HFS Plus, Mac OS Extended Journals. And when I formatted it, I set it up that way on purpose. And I'm going to open Disk Utility here for a second and show you something, so you'll see what that would look like. I went in and let's see, I need to get to my applications. And the important thing to know here is when you do this, you have to pick the right set of options or this doesn't work. Okay, I'm going to go down to Disk Utility. I want to point something out to you. Disk Utility will not let you format your internal boot drive. It's trying to protect you from yourself. The first thing you have to do if you're going to go through this procedure is to make a backup. And you see it's taking it a second to spin up because I've got several drives connected here. But one of the things that I want you to see, if this shows up, here we go, is when I look at my drives. Okay, here's my media one. Here's my High Sierra, that new drive that I made up. All right, now you can see here's the information about how it's formatted and everything. If I were to choose erase, which is what I would use to format it, I get the option to name it, set the formatting, and then tell it to erase that drive. That's what I want to do to create the blank drive. The next step that I took was to open Migration Assistant and tell it to migrate everything from my current boot drive to that external drive. That's going to take a while if you have a lot of data to back up. And it worked well, but it's just time consuming. Then the third step was booting from my external drive, because the step 4 is going to be to format your internal hard drive. And you want to be sure that you have a good backup and you know that drive is bootable, or that you have a bootable installer and a backup. We'll talk about that next week, but I just wanted you to be aware that that can be done. I'll go into some specific with some detailed references next week in our show. And it looks like, guys, that's going to just about do it for this week. That's the last of our tips and tricks. I know we didn't have much of a forum roundup due to the little bugs and idiosyncrasies, whatever you want to call it, that are going on there. So I'll try to make up for that next week, assuming everything is working well. And I've enjoyed bringing this to you this Sunday. Hope that you've enjoyed the tips. And until next week, this is your host, Sylvester Rock, a.k.a. Sly Dude on the forum. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next Sunday.